Now we drop some bars.
Ladies and gentlemen, these are the bars.
This one made me laugh out loud.
I got 3 of them.
All right, this is one. It was on page 13. It was when Imogene receives perfect before she makes the decision to say, "This is my girl."
Right.
The author wrote, Imogene received the bundle like one receives an eviction notice. It's like,
Yeah.
In my head, I verbally laughed. Not even in my head, like I laughed out loud. All right,
So Imogene talking about James Earl. He says, because James Earl was a little different from the other children.
Right.
And she says, he's just in his own world and he's in it by himself too. So he said, he's just in his own world and he's in it by himself too.
Yes.
That's deep.
Yeah.
You're in your own world, but you by yourself.
Folks in there. So another one for me. Now, the dialogue I loved in the beginning was Imogene and Harriet.
Oh, yes.
Because it's so back and forth.
It is.
And like I just see Imogene's attitude and she is not moved by her.
Right.
Like, I'm gonna make this decision. This is it. And this was the line that after she said something to Harriet, she was like, she basically says like, "Yo, this is gonna be a girl," and she starts calling her on her mess.
Uh-huh.
And then the author wrote, Harrietta's bottom lip trembled like a gospel soloist. I laughed. I said,
"That's right.
She hot. She is like
Hot. Yes.
she's super hot."
Yes.
I thought that was beautiful.
Yes,
like
sir.
that imagery, and we want to talk more about that, like that style. You got
All right, I got. This one is not just a bar; it's a text, and I just love this. Is going back to the reference of the blindness, right? Peace and Perfect and Bartimaeus are having a conversation about the wind, and the wind blows, but can't nobody see it. Why not? It don't have no color. I guess not. I'm glad can't nobody see it, so everybody know what it feels like to be blind, at least sometimes. But I ain't blind. If you can see it, if you can't see the wind, you a little blind. I guess everybody is though.
Mm-hmm.
And then skip down, he says, I guess everybody is blind to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I was like, that to me was just powerful. I just love that.
Wow.
Just
Yes, sir.
that clarity of like understanding, like, yeah, we all have our blindness, but not just the fact that you can't see the wind, but to your point, like everybody, all these characters have their own particular blind spots.
Sure.
We can go on another hour about Perfect Peace, but we want to get into just the craft of writing, right? So one question that I have, just let's talk about just your writing process, right? How do you clear your mind to even be open to these stories to even come to you? Like, are you at home? Like, how are you?
Anywhere. I don't ever have writer's block, ever.
Oh.
I have
All the
I
amateur
have a
writers
lack
got
of,
really
I have a
sad.
lack of time. I always run out of time. I never run out of things to write, or I never run out of the ability to write. I just run out of time. I exhaust myself and I fall out at night or whatever, but I never run out of things to write. Sometimes, depending on the book, different books I have to write in different places. Perfect Peace, probably 90% of it I wrote in Piedmont Park.
Mm-hmm.
And it wouldn't come to me unless I was outside.
Is it? Are you writing it by hand? Is it on a computer?
Oh, no. 99% of what I write straight from my head into the computer.
Okay. What was your journey? What was your journey into writing? Like, what was it like? Did you always love to write as a kid?
I did like to write as a kid, and I was a reader as a kid, and I remembered reading things that bored me, and so I believed that I could write things that would be exciting. Mm-hmm. I also come from amazing storytellers. My great grandmother, my father were all storytellers, and their stories were always so electric and so electrifying, and so amazing. And I wanted to put that kind of energy, right, into stories I wrote, or my writing, right. And so by 7, 8, 9, I was writing little stories or poems or whatever. And so by the time I became a teenager, I wanted to write because I just felt like there were things I could say. I felt like there were stories that I could tell that that someone else would find interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I had some thoughts that other folks may or may not have, may or may not share.
Yeah.
And so I began to play around with it. Again, my great-grandmother, who lived next door to us while I was growing up, my great-grandmother had been a school teacher, and she loved to read. Her eyesight started going bad in her senior years. And so one of my duties as a kid was to read to her.
Mm.
And I'd read to her some days, and she'd say, "That ain't it. Shit, say it like this. Say it like they supposed to be saying it." Absolutely. You said she hollered. You didn't holler. And so she would force me to almost act out.
It was the theatrics that
that's
came
right.
with
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. And so who knew that she was grooming me for this life?
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I got more.
When do you know when, so being that you always are hearing, there's always an interest to write.
I got the question already. Well, when do I know the story's
Yeah.
finished? I just saw it in your eyes. When all the voices go silent.
Okay.
When because like, in Perfect Peace, like in every book I write, I hear their voice. I hear Perfect's voice. I hear Imogene's voice. I hear Eva Mae's voice. I heard all their voices. And when they went, in fact, they almost went silent right before King Solomon came back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I knew all the pieces had to reamass. I understood that. And so when Imogene put on her black dress and the white shoes and went to the Jordan, right? I knew this was coming to a close because after that I couldn't hear Arthur Lee anymore. Couldn't hear Gus anymore. And I said, okay, this is about to be but I didn't know how it was going to end. I didn't know how I was going to wrap up.
Do they ever take a break and then come back to you? Like sabbatical?
Only if I mistreat them.
Gotcha.
Like if I misname them, they'll fall silent. That happened with King Solomon in this book. I was calling him something else at one point, and he just fell completely silent. And I was
like, I'm not feeling his name.
That's not my name.
Yeah.
That's not my name.
Yeah.
You know, but who answers to something that isn't their name? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to get his name.
It's
right.
a little subtle bar right
Yeah,
there.
it's just and so when I reassumed his correct name, he began to speak again. And so when the characters fall silent, I said the book is over. I can get maybe another page or paragraph just to close it, and it's done.
So you stay in this perpetual state of writing. So do you ever get to a place where you're hearing something, you'll be like, but that's not for this book, it's for...
In fact, that happened. I was writing Listen to the Lambs, and I was probably 200 pages into Listen to the Lambs. And I began to hear voices for the coming.
Mm.
And I knew those voices weren't for this book. I knew that. But I was like, what is this? I'm in this. You know?
What kind of discipline does it take for you and help us as
That's my
writers
favorite word.
to know, like, this is not... Because sometimes I read a book and I'm like, that's forced. That just felt forced.
Uh-huh.
Even though it's probably good, it just don't belong here. So how can you help us know, like, you know what? It's not for this book, it's for something.
Right. Well, you know, it takes discipline to write, but it also takes discipline to build intimacy.
Okay.
Right. It's very much like you and Tyreke talking. If y'all having a conversation and someone else starts talking, you will immediately know it's not him.
Mm-hmm.
It won't. There will need to be no announcement. But that's only because you know his voice that well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it has to do with the intimacy you build with the characters themselves. You know, they sleep with you. They roll with you in your own consciousness. You know, you give them space, time to talk, etc. And so when I was in the middle of listening to the Lambs, I started hearing this water first, actually. Right. And I was like, what in the world? I heard this water. I said, what in the world is this? And so I went to mentor my mind, and he said, listen, pause Lambs for a minute and just see what that is. And I did. I stepped away from Lambs for a minute. And I, probably in a day, the first 15 pages of The Coming just poured out. Oh, I've never wept that hard in my life.
That's what I want to talk about in writing as well. The emotional... How am I trying to say this? How do you deal with the emotional impact that writing has and the physical impact that writing has for you?
Oh, God. I mean, I see now why writers, as they get older, either stop writing or write books of a lighter nature, because it is a labor.
Yeah.
But it's an emotional labor.
Yeah.
Like what it takes to pull this. There are days where I'm like, I'm not physically tired. I'm just trying to conjure the emotional energy it's going to take to enter this world and to do this work. Because also you can't stay. You got to come back here and pay bills and so that entry and exit. Right. But I do ritual.
Okay.
I do rituals. In fact, when I finish The Coming, in fact, right in the coming, maybe every 2 or 3 days, I would have to go into my front yard and physically lay on the earth in order to get my own rhythm back. I would have to let the earth still and center me. Right? Sometimes it would take me hours.
Wow.
Because it was so emotionally gut-wrenching.
Now, when you're writing, and I know like you teach writing, all that kind of stuff, are you editing as you write, or you just let it go and then go back? Like,
I always edit as I write, which is not a good idea.
I can't never get nothing done if I do that.
Yeah. I just can't move on most times.
Like misspell words, all that, you gotta...
Oh, I have to do that. I have to do that. I must do that. And then I'm going to come back and edit the whole thing again.
So can you just talk some just about so if there's someone that's listening to this and they're saying, man, they are intimidated to enter in that space as a writer. They have stories they want to tell, and they just don't know. They may feel like they're not skilled enough. They may not be skilled enough. What are those things that people can begin to do to help them in this craft?
I would tell any writer, first, take you a class on grammar.
Okay.
I don't care who you are, so that you get past the imitation or the intimidation. Oh my God, I don't know if this grammar is right. I don't know. Stop not knowing.
Right.
Go learn it.
Yes.
Because this is the craft.
Yes.
You know, it's like you meet a carpenter who has no tools.
Yeah.
That house is not going to be correct.
Yeah.
You can't build a house because you think it.
Yeah.
You know, you have to have the tools. And you can't simply have a hammer and a saw if you're going to build a house.
Yeah.
There are other tools that most of us don't even know about, right? That's necessary because there are intricate parts of a house that demand other kinds of tools for the specificity of that particular thing, right? But that's true for writing too. You know, a semicolon and a colon are not interchangeable.
Right.
And you can't just use one because you just think you have it in a while. You know, there are rules for this thing. And so, and there are all kinds of classes around. You know, there are writing workshops. One can just go online and find this. But it's very important to understand, don't cheat the art just because you think you have a story to tell.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's good.
Don't cheat.
What else? So take a grammar class.
I would take a grammar class. I would start with that. And I think the worst thing a person can do is try to be a writer and not be a reader.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
So what about those folks who read books like this, read the great luminaries of our time, but they're like, I can never be this. How do you pause them and say, hold up, the goal is not to be Daniel Black, the goal is not to be Toni Morrison,
Like, the goal is to be you.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you just encourage them to not feel intimidated about the works that they read and walk away like, I can't do that?
Yes. You know, I think I would say something similar to what Toni Morrison said, and that is every single one of us, we must be prepared to write the book we've wanted to read. We keep looking for it. It's usually the one that's inside you, right? But I also think that, again, the craft of writing, I think, allows a person to get enough confidence to believe that I could write a story. Most people have the storyline, that narrative in their head. The ability to translate that onto the page is the craft of writing, right? And so, I would tell a person to take out pen and paper and to just get going. That you have to be as bold in doing that as as in anything. It's like watching Serena and believing I can never play tennis, right? But the real question is, have you ever gotten out on the court?
That's good.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would tell people that most people find a little funny, but I would tell people, understand and welcome failure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Not just know that it's coming, but welcome it.
What failure in what way?
Failure in some sentences won't work. Right? Some paragraphs you'll rewrite. There'll be ways that you take this chapter out. You might move this one around. Don't be so arrogant, and it is arrogant, and don't be so egotistical as to believe that if it comes from you, it must be extraordinary at first. It's like birthing a child. When you birth a child, all you get is a human being. And then the moment of shaping and molding comes such that what the child's excellence is going to be is yet to be determined.
Can we talk about insecurities as a writer for you, right? What those
I have them.
I've read every single thing that you've written. Is there ever this was really good. I want this next one to be just as good. Like that, just your own insecurities that you may have, and then how do you get over that to actually sit down and write the next one and not worry about that?
There were times when I was going to just delete Perfect Peace.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I was like, this is not going to work. I'm just done. Sometimes I think my sentences are too elementary. Sometimes I think my language just seems not nearly as electrifying as I would like it. I have that. I have that. In fact, when I think of great writers, I would never name myself.
Mm.
Well, see, that's interesting because, and we talked about this with Dr. Harper and Dr. Akiva, and I was saying like there's different writing styles. Obviously,
Sure.
there are those folks who their sentences may be elementary, but there's clarity.
Absolutely.
And I feel like you have a lot of clarity. However, and I'm not to call anybody out, but like when I read Ralph Ellison, there's a loquacious vocabulary, but I don't feel like I walked away like really with great clarity of what that sentence actually meant.
Sure.
So, there are people who do both well, obviously.
Sure.
So I do, and I do feel like I have some of that insecurity even in making music. It's like, well, man, I probably don't write the pocket as well as this dude, or this. But the things that I do well, I feel like it connects with people.
Sure.
And it's interesting that you say that because it's a real thing, I guess.
Yeah. It is a very real thing. And I do like clarity.
Mm-hmm.
I love clarity. In fact, I think the hardest thing to do, and I think occasionally I do it, and I'm proud of myself on those occasions, is to encapsulate a very complicated thing in a very simple, clear statement.
To me, that's the genius. To me, the genius isn't something that's super, super complex, but it's like, man, that's something I didn't understand until this sentence, this line right here.
Yeah.
Being that you are one of the most well-renowned folks that we've had on this podcast, and you've had success in selling books. 2 questions. For people who want to get published, what is that process like? But then the second thing is, how do you remain humble with this success?
So, first question, publishing. First, a person needs an agent these days.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a book called Literary Agents and Agencies. And in every library has it, every bookstore has it.
Mm-hmm.
A person should very simply go through and discover which agents represent the kind of writing they do. If you do African-American fiction, if you do Black women's fiction, if you do sci-fi, agents are listed by genres.
Okay.
Right? And they should just simply send their stuff out, their manuscript out to the agent and see if the agent likes it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way that goes. And if the agent takes you on, the agent takes you to the publisher. Nowadays, you don't send a manuscript directly to a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
Publishers won't really take them.
Mm-hmm.
They'll just put it in the trash.
Mm-hmm.
But there are thousands of agents and agencies. So I don't think that's that hard if a person will just give it a try. The second question, which was
how do you remain
humility
in your success? Because I'm gonna just say this: I know people who say this is their all-time favorite book. Perfect Peace is their. So you have written something that someone has read that says, anyone that asks me about books, I'm talking about Dr. Daniel Black's book. How do you remain humble in that?
By continuing to read the masters.
That's good.
Because as I read the masters, I see sentences, I see sentence structures, I see novellic strategies that I think far exceed anything I've done.
Who are they? Who are the masters?
Toni Morrison, certainly. Alice Walker, certainly. Marilyn Robinson, certainly. Baldwin, certainly. Edwidge Danticat. The list goes on and on and on and on. I mean, and I probably read 7 or 8 books simultaneously. That's just my rhythm. And
like that, I do similar, like 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Too.
The more I read, the clearer I am that there's mastery in places I have not reached.
That's great.
You just saw the cover, but there's more to life.
This podcast is in partnership with 4th District and Terminus Collective.